In your introduction, you have mentioned it already. There is a lot of gray elements in the mythological stories. Means there's no black and white. So a demon can be a very kind demon, or a god could be a very bad person as well at times when it comes. So what is it? What all the gray shades which you see in the mythology? So how fascinating it is actually.
Extremely fascinating. I mean, we talk about 50 shades of gray. Our Puranas have like 5 million shades of gray.
Oh, that's a
and
nice
and they
statement.
inhabit this wonderful, gloriously gray zone. I mean, imagine, like he said, there are gods who act like demons. Like Indra, for example, he's forever insecure about losing his throne, and he does the most despicable things in stories. There's one story that you'll read here where he actually attempts a feticide because he's terrified that this newborn will take his throne away from him. And then you have a demon like Bala who goes on to create something miraculous. You have a demon like Bali who sacrifices his life and his throne because Vishnu commands him to do. You have stories where a cow is cursed and a snake is blessed. Imagine Hindus reading a story where a cow is cursed, but that's what the Puranas tell you. Look at Vishnu, for example. Vishnu, when he takes birth as Ram in Treta Yuga, he is the upholder. He upholds laws, rules, everything. When he becomes Krishna in Dwapar Yuga, he is the uprooter. He uproots. Every law is broken because he believes in that, Yeah. Or you have stories where, for example, a boon leads to something bad and a curse leads to something good. So this gloriously gray zone is what the Puranas are. And this dichotomy of black and white, good and evil is a very Western concept. That kind of dichotomy exists there, where they talk about the God and the devil, heaven and hell. Puranas are a much more complex cosmos, where nothing is what it seems to be like. And that gloriously gray zone is what makes it so fascinating. And so when you read these stories, you probably wonder that it's bewildering, what does that mean? Does our cosmos have no rules? Are we operating without any rules? There's nothing to hold on to. And even I was bewildered, I was puzzled, I was mystified. But then once in a while, when you read these stories, you'll stumble upon one absolute truth, one supreme principle, one unquestionable moral. That kind of will inspire you. That will probably fill a vacuum in your life, even take you closer to God. So that is what I think the beauty of the Puranas is.
Because when you're talking about the gray shade also, maybe it's best to tell us there are so many varieties of women characters in mythology. It's pretty different, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So many
I mean,
shades
what can
of
be
women,
more,
actually.
what can be more gray? What can be more gray than the ocean of milk, which is churned? That same ocean gives you halahal, and that same ocean gives you amrita. So that I think symbolizes the kind of gray zone we're talking about. And women, there's a gamut of women in the Puranas. And what is wonderful is today we talk about gender parity. The Puranas celebrate that. When Brahma is unable to propagate, he goes to Shiva, and Shiva shows him the dazzling version of the Ardhanarishvara. That it's only when you have a male and a female can you propagate, And then the goddess is always celebrated as a savior. There are so many stories where the gods are at a helpless juncture, and they need a goddess to save them. You have that in the story of Swaha, where the gods need Swaha, otherwise they would starve to death. Okay. You have a story where a Mahishasur can only be killed by a Durga. You have Shiva creating Kali, because he says there are certain demons only Kali can kill. Or you need a Lakshmi to come from the ocean, because only then will the Swarga return back to its glory. So, woman as a savior. And then you have stories of Tara, you have stories of Sangya, where they abandon their husbands for purely physical reasons, and they're not judged. Swaha says, I don't want to stay with Surya anymore, because you'll read that. I don't want to spoil that for you. Or Tara abandons her husband and goes and elopes with Chandra. And the Puranas don't judge these women. Instead, it's the men who are judged. The men are found wanting, So that is the kind of zone I'm talking about, where the women had that kind of status in the Puranas.
That's very interesting. See, what do they say is like when we read the Greek mythology, we see a kind of a similarity between Indian mythology and Greek mythology. What's your take on that? Have you read the Greek mythology?
Yeah, of course. I mean, a lot of the gods, I do see, the similarities are there. But I think what is wonderful about the Puranas also is that there is, these 100 stories, for example, when I started writing them, like in Greek mythology, a lot of it is written in a linear way, And that I find very interesting, and that's the approach I've used here as well.
Yeah.
Because moment you create a graph, moment there is some kind of a arc, it makes the journey more interesting. So when I started writing those stories, and writing Puranic stories in a linear way is a difficult process because the concept of time in Puranas is cyclical.
Yeah.
You know, it is creation, preservation, destruction. That cycle keeps happening again and again. But then I had markers that I could use. Like, for example, whether it's the avatars of Vishnu, which worked as a wonderful marker to create a linear story, or the 7 Manavantaras that the Puranas talk about, you know, for example, the lineage of kings, the lineage of gods, you know, that allowed me to create a certain linear narrative. And when you create a linear narrative, what I was amazed to discover is that these 100 stories are not random events. You know, they're not just a collection of random occurrences in the universe. Every story is connected to each other. Every story has a past and a future. Every story has a cause and an effect. For example, we all know that in Dwapar Yuga, Kansa kills the 6 sons of Devaki. We've all heard that story. But then when you read these stories, you realize that the reason why that takes place, the reason for that lies in Satya Yuga. Something had happened in Satya Yuga which enables this to happen. Or we know about, Ravan and Ram. But why there is a Ravan and why he has an enmity with Ram, that reason lies in Satya Yuga, which now takes place in Treta Yuga. Or there is a snake sacrifice that happens in Kali Yuga by Prince Janmejaya, you know, who kills snakes because his father was bitten by Takshak. Why that particular ceremony has to take place and why those snakes have to die, that reason lies way back in Satya Yuga. So these connections are what I want my readers to take from these stories, that these are not random occurrences. Our universe is a much more complex whole, and these 100 gathas together make it a Mahagatha. So while it may sound like 100 stories, it's actually one big Mahagatha. It's one big story.
No, just maybe I can ask one simple question here. So when we say that every story is connected with some other story, that means what is the value system of mythology? So means even if I am killing someone, there is a story behind it, why I am killing him.
Exactly.
If we keep on saying that, what is the value system of mythology?
So that's what I'm saying. It's gloriously gray. There is no good and bad. There is no black and white. In Puranas, it is simple. The value system is simply karma and karma phala. You do something which becomes a karma, and that has a repercussion in this yuga, in another yuga, and that completes a circle. Like, for example, when Krishna is killed by Jara in Dwapar Yuga, the reason for that lies in Treta Yuga, and Jara is not penalized. Jara is terrified that I have killed Krishna. For me, I have killed God himself, and I'll burn in hell. Krishna looks at him and says, no, you will not, because this was destined to happen. So it is a karma fall that has happened now.
Maybe I'll ask a slightly difficult question. What is a mythology? I mean, what kind of story we can call as mythology?
You know, mythology, I think today is an extremely misunderstood word. Like, a lot of people have been trolling me on Facebook saying that, why are you calling these stories mythology? They are reality. They are history. So that confusion, I think, remains a lot. I think a lot of us still have a very colonial, a very 19th century view of the word mythology. When they equate mythology with something that is untrue, something that is false, they equate myth with mithya. But that is a very colonial and a very primitive way of looking at that word. In the contemporary sense, mythology simply means a subjective truth. It is neither fiction nor fact. It is in between. Again, it is in that gloriously gray zone, where it is about your truth, it is about my truth, it is about everybody's truth.
So if that is the case, how do I write a mythology now? I don't want to depend. See, these are all the stories which are dependent on the mythological stories which has already been told. And we are retelling that with your own language and with your own subtle detailing.
Answer that question.
So,
can I just go back to what I was saying? So about history and mythology. You know, I don't understand why we put history on a higher pedestal than mythology. That always gets me.
No. It's not like a hierarchy.
No, a lot of people do that. They feel that history is much more important than mytho. First of all, history is about mortals. It's about men and women. Mytho is about the Almighty. It's about Ishwar. It's about gods and demons. So how can that be lesser than history? History is time-bound. History is about dates from so-and-so BC to so-and-so AD. It is time-bound. It is finite. Mytho is infinite. Mytho talks about the Parabrahman, which is endless, which has no beginning and no end. Then history, also with history, I feel there is certain arrogance that comes, that I know what happened. I have evidence to show what happened. That I know reeks of arrogance, which is what history is. Mytho is about submission. It says, I don't know, and I don't care. Because what I see, what I read, that inspires me. So I don't need to know. When I see the spectacle of, say, the Ganga falling on the head of Shiva, I don't know if it happened. Hua tha, nahi hua tha, I have no idea. And I don't need to know. That spectacle itself is inspiring me, and it's giving me a life lesson that maybe when I fall in life, maybe there is a higher path that will cradle me. So that is important. We need to understand that.
You are saying that history is time bound, whereas myth is nothing to do with the time. That's a very nice statement. So what were one of our author, Jnanapita Awadi author, he always keeps telling me, see, we don't know when did this Tirupati Venkatesh took the loan from Kubera. But still we are going to, every year people are going to repay it, so there is no time limit for that. So we still believe that there is a loan kind of a thing. So that time does thing. But my question is, if I want to write a mythological story which is not being told anywhere, okay, so it's not been told in any of the Puranas, okay.
Which you
How
did with
do I do?
Tejatungabhadra.
Because I'll tell you, sir, one of the very, very famous film in South India is Maya Bajar, okay. Maya Bajar is a pure imagination. So we don't get those characters in either Mahabharata or in Puranas. Few intelligent people have sat and taken the characters of mythology. So that means they have taken Arjuna, they have taken his son and Duryodhana, Lakshana and all. They have made this Shashikala Purana. So that's what they call, Shashikala Kalyana they call. So that's how they made the mythology. A new mythological story is created. But we don't see such kind of a mythological stories now. So how does we write a new mythological story?
No, you're right. We don't see people building mythology. I think there are a host of reasons. First of all, for someone to be able to create mythology, to be able to create a universe, to do world building, you first of all need to have knowledge. Do you have the kind of knowledge? Have you read enough mytho to know what it entails to create a world like that? Also today, writers or directors are looking for shortcuts. Writers want to write bestsellers every year. Directors want to make 2 films a year. Mytho needs time. It needs to marinate. It needs to be steeped in a certain amount of research, a certain amount of love and respect for that subject. I mean, Bahubali happened because the team put in 5 years into that project. And they did nothing but that. It requires that kind of sadhana to create mythology. Also, I think it is to do with our psyche. To create and write mythology, you need to have a childlike wonder. You need to be amazed. You need to have a certain amount of a belief and a faith in what you're creating. Today, we are more cynical. How do you create mytho in an atmosphere of cynicism? I mean, we are a generation that probably grew up believing in the Santa Claus. Today's kids don't do that. And in fact, just last night, I saw a movie that made Santa a killer, and it's called Violent Night, which is a play on Silent Night. So not only are we not creating new mytho, whatever is already existing, we are tarnishing that. So in this kind of an atmosphere, where will you find new mythology? It's just not possible.
Okay, maybe I'll come to a different question altogether. See, the mythological books are well sold in English language. But if it comes to the vernacular languages, mythology is not a good seller. Okay, so generally people, if you just bring a mythological book here, people don't read it. Okay, so what's the reason why these English reading kids or the English reading adults, they are liking mythology and not the vernacular people?
I think the way I see it, it's because today's generation, they miss that layer of grandparents that we had, We talked about my grandfather. We had that layer, we had that storyteller in our house. We all grew up with some kind of a figure who knew stories and would relate and narrate these stories. Today, with families breaking up, nuclear families happening, so kids don't have that luxury. So then they depend on stories. So Devdutt Patnaik has become the national grandfather in some sort of way. He's telling all the stories, and all the
national grandfather is a good title for him.
His stories. Yeah, because you need someone, right? You need a storyteller. So I think that's the way I see it. And vernacular, again, I think because in regional and native languages, we still hold on to our roots and our culture, which is missing up there in the cities.
In fact, when we are talking about the gray areas, there's one story where I really found it very fascinating is, Jalandhara is supposed to be the Jalandhara is supposed to be the son of Kshirsagara. So that's a sea son. And also, the Lakshmi is also a daughter of sea. So now what happens? Someone wants to the gods decide, both Shiva and Brahma and all others decide that we should kill Jalandhara because he is giving a lot of problems. They go to the Vaikunta, and when they were entering the Vaikunta, Lakshmi comes and stops them. It seems, don't do that. He is my brother. And she says that is his language. It's very interesting language. It says, the same sea ocean flows in both our bodies. It's like a blood for the individuals, no? Brothers, we say the same blood is there between both of us. He uses the term saying that the same sea ocean flows in both our bodies, he says. It's quite interesting actually. Though Lakshmi is a goddess, she herself is a goddess, but she is protecting a demon for some other reasons, isn't it? So the time, when we talk about the time, now you said that you tried your level best to arrange these 100 stories in a chronological order. What is it like? How did you do that one? How do you know that what chronology order you should follow? Because they are a very, very independent story. You can open the book, you can read any story. You don't have to read all the previous stories at all. So this looks big book. It's like a dictionary. So just open and look at for 2-3 pages and read. It's over. So you can stop it and you can come again next day. So that's how it is. So how did you arrange them in a chronological order?
I'm not saying that this is 100% perfect chronology because see, like I said, Puranas are cyclical. So there is only so much chronology you can create with these stories. With maximum stories, I was lucky because like I said, there are markers in the Puranas themselves that tell you, that give you a sense of time. Like I said, for example, the avatars of Vishnu. You know that certain avatars took place in Satya Yuga, some in Treta, some in Dwapar. So then you're able to plot a graph. Or then you know about the genealogy and the lineage of kings. So you know that Dashrath came first, Ram came after that. Before that, there was a king called Raghu. Before that, there was a king called Prithu. So the whole lineage, there is a whole genealogy in these
Surya-Vansha.
So Surya-Vanshi rulers and Chandra-Vanshi rulers.
Chandra-Vansha, Mahabharata.
Yeah, exactly. And they're very clearly mentioned in the Puranas. So then then you're able to create stories according to that. Then there are Manavantaras. I don't know if you know what a Manavantara is. So Brahma's first son that he created was called Manu. And that's why we are called Manushya or Manav. And there have been 6 Manus so far. And every time period of a Manu is called a Manavantara. So we are currently living in the 7th Manavantara because the 7th Manu, this is his time, this is his Yuga. So we had these 7 Manavantaras, and then stories are there which happened in which Manavantara. So then that allowed me to create a certain chronology as well. So there are these markers which I was able to use.
According to mythology, who keeps track of these Manus? Now we are saying that the 6th Manu is over and the 7th Manu is coming, no? So what is like, according to the mythology, who is the person who is controlling that one? So who is having the counting it? Because once the Yugantara comes, so everything gets destroyed and everything is over and recreation starts,
See,
right?
no one is counting. No one is counting. This is mentioned that this is what will happen. It's all predestined. This is all, every cycle is predestined, that this is what happens, which is why when you talk about morality, when you talk about that what if someone does something evil and he is not punished, because so much of it is predestined, so much of it is a part of that cycle, so much of it is a part of karma and karma phala, that is why the reason the morality in the Puranas is so fluid, that you cannot put a single black and white division to it. That is what makes it so interesting.
And just tell me, because collecting these 100 stories and studying and putting it in a proper details is a real challenge. How was your research like? I know your grandfather was telling you the stories, but that alone will not be sufficient to write this huge book.
Today, thankfully, there are a lot of editions available of Puranas, where and wonderful English editions of all the Puranas. So that was the crux of the research, to read all those stories, to read all those Puranas, to enter that world. You talk about mythology building, just see the kind of mythology our ancient writers have created. There is a wonderful story where Brahma and Vishnu are fighting with each other. And Brahma tells Vishnu, you enter me and you see what I entail. And Vishnu enters Brahma and he sees wonderful visions inside him. The kind of imagination, the kind of spectacle that has been created in that particular story it's mind-boggling. Then Brahma comes out and Vishnu says, wonderful. Now you enter me and see what I entail. And Brahma enters Vishnu and he sees multiverses upon multiverses and parallel universes. All the NASA stuff is all there in the Puranas. We talk about black holes, we talk about parallel universes, we talk about wormholes, it's all there. So that kind of imagination, you talk about why people are not writing, you need that kind of imagination, that kind of belief and wonder to create that kind of mythology.
Very fascinating, Satyarth. So it's like, his works are very interesting. He has written autobiography on Sridevi, and he has written thrillers on history. And now on the mythology.
You know, Sridevi also kind of belongs to our
So
mythology
biography,
now.
yeah? Huh?
Also kind of belongs to our mythology,
Mythology,
now. You know,
yeah,
I remember watching an interview of Shekhar Kapoor. He talked about Mr. India. And someone asked him, why do you think that the film still gets so much love after 30 and 35 years? Why do Hawa Hawaii and Mogambo still fascinate us? And he had a very simple answer. He said, because they have entered mythology.
Mythology.
They have become larger than life.
Okay.
That's what I'm talking about. History and mytho. Please stop
Come.
eulogizing
Yeah.
history.
So
History we forget. History is dates, we forget. Mytho becomes a part of your life.
Okay.
It becomes a way of life and you'll never forget that.
Okay. Now I'll read the Sridevi biography with this perspective, saying that it's mythology and nothing to do with the history.